I think there's an issue that people aren't talking about with gay marriage. There's a lot of things that they beat around the bush with.
Fantasyland is what we do. You're either writing something, writing a song, writing a book, doing a movie, doing a television show. That's Fantasyland.
Most of you would know Kurt Russell as that Disney kid we grew up watching, but just like a lot of his Hollywood buddies, he's not afraid to speak out against woke culture, which, according to him, is chipping away at our freedom. Later in this video, you'll see more about what he thinks, but it's not a big surprise that Kurt feels that the woke crowd is completely out of touch with the reality and is living in a completely different life, to say the least. Whether it's about gay marriage or gun control, he's got very strong opinions, and he's not one to shy away from expressing them. And honestly, whenever someone asks Kurt to talk about what he thinks, it's quite often just so they can stir up drama and get Kurt all riled up.
I've never seen that. Really? What do you think about that when you...
Frightening.
So yes, for some reason, Kurt often finds himself completely baffled by the mindset and way of thinking people who are all of the woke culture. To show just how serious he takes this, you'll see later in this video how he stands up to woke bullies like the big boss Disney. But even before that, you can tell he gets pretty fired up when it comes to the whole woke debate. And when it comes to speaking his mind, Kurt has never been seen holding back. And this becomes even more true when we're talking about woke culture. And when it's about gun control, Kurt might have one of the most intense opinions amongst all of Hollywood. And this is definitely saying something.
You can say what you want. I don't agree with that. So it's not my thing.
But it's
so,
statistically...
Well, you can look. If you think gun control or something like that is going to change a terrorist point of view, I think you're like out of your mind. I think you're like, I think anybody is. I think it's absolutely insane.
Now, if you're sitting there wondering what Kurt really meant, let me sum it up in 3 words: mutually assured destruction. According to Kurt, he thinks the way to keep gun culture in check isn't by making rules about who can have guns, like the woke crowd argues. Instead, he believes everyone should be allowed to have guns, so it acts as a deterrent for those who might get trigger happy. He insists this idea is right and worth standing up for, and if the government doesn't agree, well, that's nothing new.
And that is that no government ever hasn't had to fight its own people, and its own people hasn't had to fight its own government. We had our Civil War.
But here's what makes his argument even more interesting. The simple fact that the Second Amendment, which was put in place by Americans' founding fathers, is what actually gives people the right and the power to protect themselves.
If that Second Amendment hadn't been there, those people would not have had the opportunity to do what they considered was defending their life, their way, their style of living.
Kurt says it's really that simple. But what's even more interesting is that he's not only the one in Hollywood who feels this way.
To survive in woke culture, you have to become a liar. You have to pretend that you think fat is beautiful. You have to pretend to be race obsessed. You have to pretend that you think Dylan Mulvaney is a woman.
It is true that in order to be considered woke, you have to go through an act of pretending that you're unaware of what is actually taking place. This mentality is making its way into Hollywood, particularly with regard to the manner in which they want their films to be produced, as you will see down the road. The fact that Kurt is one of the most well-known names in the business will be discussed at a later point in the content of the video. It would appear that there is a long list of things that the woke crowd is doing that really irritates Kurt Russell, particularly in regard to the manner in which they demonstrate their beliefs regarding gay marriage.
I think there's an issue that people aren't talking about with gay marriage. There's a lot of things that they beat around the bush with. My beef, I'm a libertarian, so my beef with advantages given to anybody.
It can be really tough to figure out why any group should get special treatment over others just because they're part of the woke community. But honestly, it's not even the privileges surrounding marriage in the woke community that get Kurt the most worked up. There's something else entirely that triggers him more than that.
So the people who want to defend themselves can't?
No, not so you can't, just so the idiots can't get a hold of them. That's
Do you really believe they're not going to? Are you serious about that?
According to woke folks, if gun control gets in place, it'll cut down the number of people who want guns for all the wrong reasons. Sure, that sounds logical enough, but Kurt points out the other side of the coin that the woke crowd isn't talking about. If these laws happen, innocent people who want to protect themselves from those trigger-happy idiots won't be able to. And that's neither fair, nor does it make sense. And while making his point, Kurt does it in the most sarcastic, almost patronizing way, but it's still a pretty convincing argument.
The behavior of people that are dead set on taking your way of life away from you, I think you can control that.
Hold on a second. Why don't we take a step back? What exactly are the results of laws that restrict access to firearms? According to Kurt's arguments, criminals with ill will always find a way to acquire firearms, regardless of the laws that are in place. This is the case regardless of circumstance. The law-abiding citizens are now left as sitting ducks under the circumstance. In what way could you possibly argue against that? Also, just to add a little bit of spice to the mix, Kurt is not the only person in Hollywood who has strong opinions regarding the regulation of firearms. In fact, it appears that musician Ted Nugent is even more enraged and unrepentant about it. Let's check it out.
Moral compass can be determined by how he references free men the right to defend themselves.
At least Kurt's being somewhat polite by saying the Second Amendment should be respected, right? Well, Ted, on the other hand, goes completely off the rails when it comes to this topic.
I don't need a document, and I don't need another man to explain to me that I have the right to defend my gift of life.
In simpler terms, gun control is really about controlling people's rights. If you think about it, Ted and Kurt see it as just a plain common sense thing that everyone should have the right to own a gun. They believe it's a solid way to keep everyone safe, and they argue that this should be a basic human right. When it comes to the woke left, they think those folks seriously need a reality check. While we're still on the topic of reality checks, the entire discussion surrounding wokeness frequently revolves around the question of whether or not the woke crowd is somewhat disconnected from reality. There is a lot of discussion regarding the manner in which these concepts are being imposed on everyone else, regardless of whether or not they are in agreement with it. This topic is extremely popular, and it's not confined to the realm of Hollywood alone. Speaking of which, we can't have this conversation without mentioning Jordan Peterson. He's got some pretty strong views on wokeness, especially when it comes to gender equality. His take definitely adds another layer to this whole ongoing debate.
Your gender identity is so fluid that you can change it every hour if you want, and it's not fixed at all. And it's infinitely variable at your whim. Okay.
Being so bold and outspoken about his beliefs, like Kurt, definitely has its downsides. Because of his loud voice and strong opinions, especially when it comes to his stance on how the government shouldn't be giving out special benefits to new gay couples just because they're together. Kurt has become a target in Hollywood. Other celebrities, especially from the woke side, have really gone after him. It's no secret that Kurt's strong opinions aren't just for interviews and talk shows. He's just as vocal on set. Kurt is known for refusing to let woke agendas mess with his scripts or characters, and he definitely won't be a part of anything like that. In fact, around August 4th, 2024, rumors started swirling that Kurt had cut ties with Walt Disney Company because he couldn't stand their woke agenda anymore. He was even quoted saying he was fed up with the woke culture, and it felt like he had wasted his career with the company. He went on to say that Hollywood is heading for big trouble if it doesn't fix some things. And honestly, you can't help but wonder if he's right. But as much as this wouldn't surprise anyone, it turns out that those rumors aren't backed by any real evidence. Still, dozens of people die every day at the hands of criminals who have no fear or remorse, knowing their victims can't defend themselves. That's why Kurt believes gun control does absolutely nothing to stop the violence. And if you disagree, how can you argue with that?
Well, you can look. If you think gun control or something like that is going to change a terrorist point of view, I think you're like out of your mind. I think anybody is. I think it's absolutely insane.
In the end, the stance is pretty clear, and this debate will always swing both ways. But what do you think? Is Kurt Russell onto something, or is he just missing the mark? Let us know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more like this. We'll catch you in the next one.